Which of these four anxious anime girls has the best mental health? That is what I'm choosing to use my professional qualifications as a therapist to talk about today. Well, on a more serious note, people relate closely to the Dokis because the problems that we see them deal with in the game are pretty close to a lot of those that many of us deal with in real life. From anxiety to depression to managing complicated interpersonal relationships. And it's safe to say that they've all got things to work on. So I thought it would be fun to kind of get into what makes good mental health. And how can we look at these four characters and how they kind of represent a lot of problems that regular people deal with and see if we can't learn something about getting better mental health ourselves. So what makes someone have good mental health? Can you even have this? Wow, it's not something we're going to be able to define very easily. And there are many therapeutic modalities that have different perspectives on what makes good mental health. For the purpose of this analysis, I'm going to use good mental health kind of interchangeably with like resilience. And resilience is kind of our ability to endure the struggles of our lives. It doesn't necessarily mean we have tons of problem solving skills. It doesn't mean we have every aspect of life figured out. It just means that when things go wrong, what is our response to it? And so we can get a little closer to like what is good mental health by kind of narrowing it down to this term resilience. Because in Doki Doki Literature Club, these characters endure a lot of stuff. And it's actually a great window into this because it starts off pretty small. The characters deal with common insecurities and anxieties, and then things start to ramp up. And that is where like real resilience is tested. What kinds of behaviors start to come out as we try to respond to more and more discomfort, physical discomfort, emotional discomfort? Do we start to isolate and lash out? Do we start acting in uncharacteristic ways? And that's what makes Doki Doki Literature Club so great is it's like kind of a misery simulator. It's just like, let's throw a bunch of terrible stuff at some very innocent people and let's see what happens. So that brings us to the question, which of the four Dokis has the best mental health? Which one is the most resilient to the stress that they have to deal with? Well, there's a therapeutic perspective that I want to bring into this called acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT. And the goal of ACT is to try to figure out what our baseline for resilience, or in this case, psychological flexibility, looks like. Because the entire modality is about accepting the things we can't change and committing action to the things that we can. And our resilience or psychological flexibility is often tested by us not understanding the difference between those two things. And we try to over-control things that are actually not in our control, and that causes anxiety. Or we become hesitant or avoidant to try to commit to changes that we actually can make. And that also makes us less resilient. So ACT is all about finding this medium between what am I capable of, being realistic about that, and not trying to control every aspect of my life, but how do I endure the things that I can't? And there's a very cool shape that ACT uses to help us understand what makes up this psychological flexibility, and it's called a hexaflex. So the hexaflex points out 6 different parts of psychological flexibility, and we're going to look at all of them and see how the Dokis either do or do not do particularly well with each of these 6 things. So we have presence of mind, self as context, cognitive diffusion, acceptance, values, and committed action. So the first one here, pretty simple. Presence of mind. This is our ability to actually stay in contact with the present moment. And the perspective here is that when we don't feel like we're in control of something in the present, we will often slip into trying to control the future or trying to control the past. And both of these have the potential to create some anxiety for us, because think about the behavior that is staying stuck in the past, right? What we're talking about here is kind of ruminating. The past is just a memory, right? Like we can't go there, we can't interact with it. And so the act of thinking about it in a productive sense is like, how do we take lessons from the past and make actions in the present that are preparing us well for the future? Like that's supposed to be our relationship with these like 3 different things. But when we find that we're sort of ruminating on things in an anxious way, in a troubling sort of way, like if you just find yourself thinking about negative things that have happened and you struggle to let go of them, this isn't reflection in a healthy sense. This is ruminating, right? It's anxiety. And it is kind of our attempt to control past events by giving our present emotional energy to it. We're sort of scraping around in our memories for some kind of information that makes us feel like we're doing something productive by sort of getting hung up on something that's already happened. And then we have the future, which is not a place that we can go either. It's just an idea, right? It's not something that has happened and no one can really predict it with full accuracy. In a healthy sense, it's great to try to plan for, but when it starts to become unhealthy is excessive worrying. And it's the same idea here, right? If I can't control something in my present, I might visit the future and visit the past and like try to gain some kind of control, if only mentally, over my circumstances by just thinking about them. And part of the problem with this and why it can cause some anxiety is that it teaches your brain to think that worrying about stuff or ruminating about stuff is the same thing as problem solving. Worrying is not problem solving. Like, it is not the same activity for your mind. It doesn't provide the same kind of relief or something that actually leads to action. Because typically, like, that kind of action and relief that we get from actual problem solving means that we do not have to return to the problem over and over again. The fact that when we ruminate and we just sort of cycle over like past negative events, and even though we go through them, we continue to come back to them, like that's a sign that this is not the same thing as like good problem solving. And the same thing with worrying. If you don't find yourself worrying a problem to completion and then stopping, then this is not really productive. And so this is a big part of psychological flexibility or resilience is, can we remain in the present even though we're not fully in control of it? Are we able to not try to escape or evade the discomfort of present thoughts and emotions and behaviors that we have to make? So let's think about our girls, all right? Like how good are each of them at staying present? Let's start with Natsuki, because when I think about like the poems that she wrote and some of the subjects that come up when you talk to her, and when we start to see her anxiety come out, I think she struggles quite a bit with this presence of mind, right? Like she's very preoccupied with what people are thinking about her. You have that poem, Amy Likes Spiders, which is very clearly about like her experience with being judged by others. And it seems she tends to hold kind of a grudge about this. For what it's worth, I respect you. Well, I guess thanks. But it's kind of obvious that you respect Yuri more. So, well, see, there's her rejecting an attempt at closeness for this like very surface level physical attention. You're smarter than this, Natsuki. Whatever. We're done sharing, so you can leave now. Oh, poor thing. She doesn't know what to do with this like wire cross, so she just pushes away. She is often distracted from her present experience by things that happened to her before. I'm thinking about like the fight with Yuri, for example, or many of her Yuri interactions, where with more presence of mind, you might be able to see that there's actually quite a bit of commonality between the two of them. And there's even some attempts to like repair things on both of their sides. But Natsuki is like, she's living in the past in that moment. She's still holding on to this like, yes, but I feel like you've judged me before. Like there's a more prominent memory of what this person has done or said or what I think about them than what is happening to me right now. I don't think she struggles as much with worrying about the future, but I think there's a little bit of that too. She's sort of anxiously anticipating more judgment from people. And like sometimes she is actually being judged by them. So it's not to say that she's not accurate in that. It's just being correct about what people think about you or if they're judging you is kind of irrelevant to this. It's like, this is your psychological flexibility at stake. Like, do you want to feel anxious about it? People are going to judge you, right? That's part of the acceptance in acceptance commitment therapy. Are you able to endure this? Or do you find that when you receive that judgment, you are sort of stuck on it and you compensate by like avoiding those people or gossiping about them? Or do you constantly anticipate it? And even if someone starts to show you a different side to them, do you already have this kind of negative bias that like discludes new information that says like, hey, actually, this person is capable of change? So I think she kind of struggles with this presence of mind part. Now, self as context is about how attached you are to your own personally held beliefs. This is part of our flexibility because we all have certain ideas about ourselves that our experiences will challenge at times. Like I have the idea that I'm like a good therapist, right? But there are times where I like struggle in my job, right? As anyone does. And am I able to experience something like that and not have this immediate, very rough integration of that with my ego that says like, oh, I did a bad job. I must like no longer be this good therapist that I think I am, right? Like, can I recognize that my experiences are very dynamic and not every single one of them needs to be deeply ingrained with the self? Can you give yourself a break, basically? Like, or do you find that you're very hard on yourself? Can you see your experience as context to who you are as an entire person, rather than taking individual negative experiences and calling that your whole person? Like, oh, I failed today. I must be a failure. So here's where I think Natsuki wins back a couple of flexibility points that she loses elsewhere, because I think that she's pretty good at accepting herself. She is like very willing to defend, like, I like manga and I do not care what anyone thinks about it. Like I could ever get my friends to read this. They just think manga's for kids. I can't even bring it up without them being all like, you still haven't grown out of that yet? Makes me want to punch them in the face. Ugh, I know those kinds of people. Honestly, it takes a lot of effort to find friends who don't judge, much less friends who are also into it. I'm already kind of a loser. What can I say? He sets me up for this. It's not herself as context that she's struggling with when that causes some tension in her, right? It's more so this and some other parts of this that we'll get to. But I think that part of why she is so frustrated by people making broad judgments about her for an interest is because she says like, look, that is just one part of me. Okay. It's not everything about me. And just because someone else might have this bias that it is like kind of trashy literature or that it's not literature, doesn't translate to like my personality being trashy. So self as context, I think that she's got that one. Struggles with presence of mind. Cognitive diffusion. So I talked about this during my playthrough, and it's kind of similar to self as context because it is about like learning to observe yourself non-judgmentally, but this is more so about your thoughts specifically. So in my example, right, like sometimes I have the thought, okay, cognitive diffusion is about thoughts. A thought will just sort of come to your mind like, God, I'm an idiot. I'm such an idiot right now. And if we're struggling across the arc here, like we might start thinking about all the times that we were idiots before, right? And that's like messing up our ability to be present. And like we might integrate that as a deep core part of the self. And so cognitive diffusion is this ability to detach from the thought and recognize that you are just a person experiencing that thought, okay? So the way that this plays out is if I'm having the thought, I'm an idiot, to diffuse this, like to remove its fusion from identity and from myself, I actually want to recognize that I am having the thought of being an idiot. I'm not actually an idiot. I'm just thinking about being one. Right now, I am having the thoughts that I'm an idiot. Like I'm feeling like an idiot, but I'm not an idiot. I'm just having this moment where that feels true because of like these experiences that I'm having. Like I messed something up. It's fair to say that. Like I failed in this instance. Like we're not trying to remove ourselves of responsibility of negative things. Like we're just trying to say there's a thought crossing through my mind that I'm an idiot. And like I'm experiencing that thought. It's pretty unpleasant, but that's not the same thing as actually being an idiot. And this applies to so many things. Like, oh, I'm a failure. I'm feeling like a failure, right? Like I am a person who is sort of neutral to the experience of failure. And I'm experiencing like all kinds of ideas of failure. And that's not to say I didn't mess something up, but it's like, okay, I want to react to these thoughts of failure and not be distracted by this like inner conflict I'm creating where I'm like, I'm a failure deep in my core, right? Like that's messing with our resilience here. This one's hard to tell with any individual character because we don't exactly know what they're thinking, but every once in a while, you know, people will make statements like that, like I'm not good enough or my friends don't like me. And it's like, okay, well, diffusion is this process of neutrally stepping back from those thoughts and being curious about them. Like, okay, you're having thoughts of like not being good at something. Like, how do you feel about those thoughts? Rather than trying to interrogate specifically, like, are you good enough? Right? Because then you'll lead yourself down trying to pacify, do your friends actually like spending time with you? Let's just look at the idea. Like, why are you having thoughts that your friends don't want to spend time with you? Where did that thought come from, right? Like let's sort of work on the thought and kind of step back from you being the problem in this instance. Because if you don't do that, you might sort of start retreating into, well, because I actually am a really uninteresting person and my friends don't want to spend time with me, versus diffusing from that and saying like, oh, well, I haven't heard from them in a while. And so like sometimes that creates the thought pattern of not being wanted. And is that a familiar experience, right? Like, so we start getting into these influencing each other. I'm going to say that no one's good at this to begin with, because it's like something you sort of have to sit down and learn and think about. It's a bit abstract. Whereas like sometimes being present and being a little more kind to yourself, putting yourself in context, or come a little more naturally to people. But this one, not so much. Like this is just, that's a skill you got to learn. Acceptance, pretty straightforward. Are we able to make a distinction between things that we can change and things that we cannot? And when we can't change them, do we try to exercise control in a frustrated, anxious way over things and end up causing additional problems for ourselves? For example, and we'll get to Monica, but Monica struggles with this, right? Like she struggles with accepting the circumstances that she's in, that she's trapped in this non-reality of the game. And so she exercises control over her peers in very negative ways, leading to problems for them and increasing the problems for herself that she initially struggled with, right? That's not to like say that she's justified or not justified. I'm not really interested in that conversation in this video. She clearly struggles with acceptance, right? And that's not a judgment on her. Like it is just something we can observe. She's not able to accept the circumstances that she's in. And so she compensates by trying to control other things. There's no point in trying to do anything. It's Yuri's own fault that she's so unlikable. Can you hear me, Brady? If you would just spend more time with Monica, all these problems would go. Yeah, I'm sure Natsuki thinks that. Yuri and I are too messed up for someone as wonderful as you. We're not even a character anymore. Just think of Monica from now on. Just Monica. Just Monica. Just Monica. Natsuki, though, I do feel like she's pretty resilient here. Like, there's a lot of curveballs thrown at her throughout the story. And especially when things with Monica start happening, like, she is the first to kind of identify it. And she doesn't panic. She's sort of just like, hey, protagonist, like, here's what you should be aware of. Like, I'm concerned as well, but I do not see her sort of denying her circumstances in a very frustrated, anxious way. I find that she is very good at saying, all right, like, what is the situation I'm in and what can I do about it? Rather than getting stuck in denial of like what she's able to do and what she's not. And actually at that point in the story, she kind of like gains a little bit of this back. So I think she kind of fluctuates here. I'll give her half points for that. Values. Values are not the same thing as goals. This is also something we discussed in a recent video on the channel, but they are the direction that goals point us to. Like happiness, for example, it's not great as a goal to be happy because it's so abstract. You can't really measure it. And there's no condition that's going to confirm whether you have it or not. And it's not concrete enough, but it is a value, right? Like I value my own happiness. I value my peace of mind and these sorts of things. And along the way, I may choose goals for myself that are, for example, to work less in my life, right? Like that's probably a goal. I want to work this many less hours, or, I want to be this independent so I can work less. And that goal is informed by this value, but it is not the same thing as the value itself. Like there will be a point where I can say, yes, I am now working this less amount of hours. And I know that in the pursuit of that goal, like my value of happiness is being attended to. But you will not get your value. You will not accomplish it the same way you'll accomplish a goal. And some people just have an easier time choosing goals for themselves, and others relying less on them and more so on like identified values that they allow to guide them through their goals. Okay. So Natsuki's got values, right? Like there are definitely things that she cares about. We see this in a lot of her behaviors. She cares about respect. She cares about like her aesthetic. Sometimes this like is frustrating for her because she doesn't like that everyone thinks she's just cute. She cares deeply about the quality of her work and whether or not people can like recognize it. And she has like some integrity as well about like, even though it's simple, that doesn't make it less profound. Like she has thought deeply about the substance of her own character and why she is that way. And this informs a lot of her goals. It makes her a great writer. It sometimes gets in conflict with things when she feels like she doesn't get respect from other people. And then she might struggle with things here like, oh, I'm being disrespected. Like, Yuri doesn't like my poem, or I'm being ignored by the protagonist. And then like getting really involved in those thoughts and not being able to step back from them and recognize that like, yeah, but at the end of the day, it's like, it's still a value of mine that I can hold above any sort of immediate second guessing rejection that I'm feeling. Like, just because you're feeling rejected doesn't mean you are being rejected, right? That's a little bit of diffusion. So she's got values. And committed action. Are we then able to take the values that we have and take steps towards whatever goals that we attach to them? And so this is more about focusing on the action that aligns you with a value rather than any specific outcome. So if my value is to be a good writer, right? That's something that I care about if I'm Natsuki. Putting my effort into writing and sharing it with people and like studying my craft and refining things, like that is committed action towards things. But if I focus too much on the outcome, right, whether or not someone says my writing is good, then I'm struggling to resolve my value and focusing more on like a intermediate goal. I think she struggles here because she does kind of rely on some of that validation. Like she hates when people don't get her writing. Like she feels that she needs the outcome of saying that I'm good, right? Sort of a compliment, some kind of external validation. And that means that she is focused more on the outcome rather than being satisfied that she is taking valued action in her life towards something that she cares about without reliance on any specific moment that says this was worth it or you've achieved this or whatever. Brady? Please just tell me you like my poems. Oh, I don't care if you hate them. Just please tell me I'm the best. I just really need to hear that from someone. You should have heard that from someone in your life, Natsuki. And it is a fucking disgrace that it wasn't your parents or a friend. Not that they needed to tell you were the best. I think the fact that it's going all the way to that extreme just tells me no one ever even told her that she was any good, which is tragic. Someone should have told you that you are lovable, good, kind, talented, interesting, deserving of their curiosity. Someone should have said those things. Why does that affect our psychological flexibility? Well, because then you become dependent on external things you can't control, things you have to accept. Some people won't like your writing. Some people won't like this video. Some people just don't like my channel, and that's fine. Like, if I'm too hyperfixated on the outcome, meaning the amount of likes that it gets, the amount of views that it gets, despite taking committed action towards my value of making good content or doing something that's worthwhile creatively, like I'll still feel bad about it. It'll still make me anxious. I might stop making a content that I like just because it's not getting the outcome that I want. And if this goes too unchecked, like then you end up with really people-pleasing types of behavior because you will start subverting all of your values to get good outcomes from people, right? When people say that I'm good at something or that they like me or whatever it is, right? Like values become very secondary to getting some kind of external validation. So we want to switch our focus and our attention away from what kind of outcome am I looking for, and just do our best to act with commitment towards the values that we have. And first, we have to know what those values are. But I do think that this is something that Natsuki struggles with. So where is she at? She's got 1, 2, 3, 3.5. I'll give her a 3.5 out of 6, which I actually think is pretty good, all things considered. That this is without any sort of like therapeutic training or guidance. Like, she's probably above the average here. So let's dig into the rest. Sayori. Can she stay present? I feel like this one's kind of hard to give like a hard yes or no on for really any of the characters, because they do have moments where this is more achievable. Like at the early parts of the story, like Sayori is very blissfully engaged in the present moment. In fact, this is like one of the best things about her, is that she's not really hyper fixated on the emerging dynamics between the people around her. Like, because the protagonist is of interest to the other Dokis, it's very likely that he's thinking a lot about the conversations that they had and what he's going to say to them the next day. And like, he's pretty distracted, and they may be as well. But Sayori's pretty present. Like, I'm actually going to give that one to her, because even when she starts to struggle the most, right, she's able to verbalize like what she is feeling right now. Oh, I like this one, Brady. It has some nice feelings in it. I'm glad. Does that mean it's better than yesterday's? Let me think. I don't know. I guess I like them both. That's not very helpful, you know. Well, I'm not very good at figuring out if poems are good or bad, but that's why I just go by my heart. If it makes me feel things, then it must be a good poem. God damn it, why didn't I pick her? She is the one. I agree completely with that statement. She questions things like, why does my heart hurt so much? This isn't about having like a deep, solid understanding of what you're experiencing, but it is not retreating to the past or trying to escape to the future as this like way of evading what you're feeling. Like, she stays pretty present with things all throughout. And if she were able to get some like therapeutic intervention in the midst of everything that's going on, this is probably one of the most powerful interventions that could have helped her. Self as context, can she sort of distinguish like negative events in her life from core beliefs? No. Unfortunately, no. Like, she draws pretty black and white lines with like, the protagonist gave like some attention to someone else today, so I'm basically worthless. Like, if I can't make myself useful, then I am useless. Like, no, she's pretty bad at this. Diffusion also, no. Like, she's not able to kind of step back from the independent thoughts that she's having. In a similar sense, you know, I'm feeling worthless, so I must be worthless. She's not able to step away from that and saying like, oh, the thought of worthlessness is like really present in my mind, but I don't have to associate strongly with it and identify with it. So probably not. Acceptance. Does she deny the reality that she's in? I'm going to say no to this, but for a different reason than some of the others, which is that Sayori doesn't accept positive things that happen to her either. Like, she's not denying reality because she can't face negative things. She denies positive things and favors a perception of herself that is like kind of, negatively informed by these core beliefs. You know, whatever you choose, like, Sayori, you're my best friend, or that you love her, right? Like, she's not able to believe that. She doesn't believe that that's coming from a genuine place. She sort of discounts that but that's not possible. You couldn't possibly believe this about me. Like, I'm not worthy enough for that kind of attention, or I don't love myself enough, or whatever it is. So I feel like, yes, acceptance is often about realizing what you can't control, But it's also about recognizing some of your positive qualities. And like, if you're the type of person who really struggles to take a compliment, like, then yeah, you're not psychologically flexible with acceptance. Flexibility is not just about like enduring negative things. It's like, can you integrate positive things too? And the way I see it is, if someone says something positive about you, regardless of whether you agree, that is their experience of you. If someone says, hey, I think you did a great job, or I think you're really good at this, you might disagree. You might think, no, I'm terrible, right? And then you're struggling with this and this. And you're also struggling with this because, like, the fact is, that person's reality of you is positive, and you actually have no say over this. Like, you discarding that compliment is a denial of the reality that someone, regardless of what you think, thinks something different about you, something good. And it is okay to accept that and not think that this is going to send you down like an ego trip or something, right? That's this and this working together to say, like, yes, I might feel like an incomplete person, but I'm capable of doing a good thing. I might feel like I don't offer much to the people in my life, but sometimes they clearly do think I offer something. And I have to accept, that this good moment, this good idea about me given from someone else is a part of the context of myself. So I feel like Sayori really struggles with that. She's not able to accept praise or compliments in a positively integrating way. At some points in the story, she is like, she's willing to take compliments about her poems, but this really does break down along the way. And I feel like with a deeper acceptance of things, acceptance that she really did have the support that she needed, if she was willing to, take advantage of that, then things could have been very different for her. So no, she doesn't get acceptance. Values. I also talked about this in a recent episode, but it's not to say that she doesn't have them. Everyone has them, of course. But does she know what they really are? I have to say no. I have to say no because I think the values that she has are more influenced by fearful things. Like, I value being useful to people. I value everyone else being happy, but she's not valuing her own happiness as much, right? Like, that's always secondary to whether other people around her are happy. Like, even on the first day or whatever, she's like talking about how much better it would be if the protagonist spent some time with the other girls. Like, how could there be a circumstance where someone wants to spend time with me? Like, she values other people's experience so far above her own that I feel like this makes it difficult to have values that steer her in a good direction. Walking home with Yuri, huh? There's not even any point in speculating something that's never going to happen. Well, maybe, but I just like to think about it. She's so, like, more desperate to please us that she is literally bludgeoning her own desires. It's not long before you won't need me anymore, Need you? Sayori, nobody in the club is a replacement for you. Oh. This is genuinely making me actually sad. If you say, oh, she doesn't believe us. She doesn't believe us. Oh my god. Oh my god. This is gonna destroy me. At the same time, yeah, she struggles with that fixation on outcomes as well. Someone needs to say to me like that I did a good job or that I was useful. And even then, like, she sometimes doesn't believe it. So unfortunately, yeah, I do find that Sayori is probably the least psychologically flexible. Probably. She's present. She is a present person, and that's what makes her so fun and so adorable. It's something I think a lot of us are probably envious of that just ability to like really be not kind of lost in thought, but yes, based on the outcome of the game, there's not a lot there that makes her flexible to increasing levels of distress. So Sayori's at a 1. Not super good. Yuri. What does Yuri have going on? Well, I think that Yuri has a pretty strong presence of mind. There's often these moments where she almost changes demeanor and changes personality. Like, she has a very different way of speaking, and she's very in touch with herself. And then something will break this, right? Some kind of tension or embarrassment or whatever, and she sort of falls away from this. But I actually think that that's a sign of like, yeah, she's very present with her thoughts and her feelings and really in tune with them when she's having them. And I think we see that flexibility come out when she is like, arguing with people, for example, like she sort of, gets like this and is able to really keep her perspective clear. Self as context, though, does she identify in negative or limiting ways with some of her like behavioral patterns and some of her self beliefs? I think that yes, she struggles here. I'm thinking particularly of the cutting behavior. She's very self conscious about like, she calls this like an interest in knives, right? But finally, we're alone. Nobody to interfere with our reading time. Nobody to make me feel like stabbing myself in the throat. That was a joke. Just a joke. I do like knives, though. It sounds strange, but you wouldn't understand if you've never seen how beautiful they can be. I have an idea. Why don't you come to my house sometime? I can show you my collection. I've gotten them all from various artisans. I make sure to give them all a fair share of use. I don't want them to get lonely or anything. Nobody deserves to be lonely. Nobody. She identifies a little too closely with like the idea that she's weird and that this makes her harder to connect with in some ways, or would make it harder for people to help her if she even recognizes this as something in need of help, which she doesn't, right? I feel like that's another part of this, which is that she has kind of normalized this behavior as something that is not a major risk factor for something pretty dangerous. And yeah, it's very hard to diffuse your thoughts if you like don't have this sort of self as context. Again, I'm going to say that like a lot of us really without some work are actively working on this. So it's not going to be easy to have. Although like we sort of saw earlier, I do think Natsuki was able to kind of have one without the other in some ways. Acceptance. How does she respond to things that she can't control? Well, so much of her like cutting behavior is, it's like kind of a repressed desire. It tends to be a response to like kind of romantic discomfort that she feels, or some kind of relief to that. I have to go with no on this, because that is a pretty unhealthy way of like exerting control over something that she's not able to control elsewhere. And it also doesn't seem like it's registering to her like how dangerous it is. I feel like she also struggles a little bit with that like positive affirmation. She struggles to see herself as complex and interesting as the protagonist might see her when we're on her route. So no, I have to say that she struggles more with acceptance than shows success with it. Not to say that she's not able to accept certain things, but I think on the whole, the one that she struggles with the most is a pretty big deal. There's a denial of some very real risks there that do escalate to a pretty unfortunate ending for her. Values. I do feel like we see very strong value-guided decisions from Yuri. In a similar way to Natsuki, she like really stands up for what she believes in when it's contested. She cares about knowing deeply about herself and doesn't want things to just be on the surface. And so those as values dictate how she spends her time when she's not at school, how she presents herself, how she communicates with other people. And I do feel like that also lends into being more in touch with value-led action rather than any specific outcome from them. She doesn't feel the need to be told, like, you're a deep person or you're a complex thinker. Like, it's enough for her to act with commitment towards the things that make her feel that way, like the stuff that she reads, sharing it with the protagonist, developing her writing style, and she's like very proud of the fact that like she's developed this, for a long time before the game's even started. Like she's not at all focused on someone saying, your writing's very good. She's like, excuse me, that I'm really not dependent on that. So I find that she's pretty good in that department. So she gets 3 of these, just behind Natsuki, but only by a shred. And lastly, we have Monica. Just Monica. Monica. Oh boy. I think she's the most complicated to really dig into here, because the other 3, if we were to look at them without the narrative itself driving them towards these like very tragic endings, like this would probably be a very different conversation. But the fact is, Monica has an influence on these other characters. Like they already have presenting anxieties and depression and that sort of thing, but like Monica's actions and the way that the game unfolds, they amplify a lot of those signals. They really put this sort of flexibility to the test for everyone. And it's hard to say that like without some of Monica's meddling, would Sayori have been more resilient? Would she have some of these dimensions of flexibility that we didn't get to see for her? Same thing for Yuri and Natsuki. Like, would some of these tragic outcomes have been inevitable if we didn't have someone kind of puppeteering their worst qualities? It's hard to say, but like Monica, she is someone who has an existential crisis, and it tests her flexibility, right? Like, what does she do in response to basically like learning that she doesn't exist? Obviously, it's easy to say that like, she has kind of a breakdown like many of the other characters, but I actually think that based on the original ending of the game, that she proves herself pretty resilient to this very extreme situation of like, realizing you're not real, and is able to make a very values-based decision in the midst of that. She decides, to restore the other Dokis, even knowing that the outcome, right? The outcome is not going to solve anything. She knows that this is like pointless in the grand scheme of things. It's not going to free her from the prison of the game. It's not actually going to give them new life. It's just going to reset things. But she cares enough about that, and she cares about the action itself, not the outcome. What's wrong with me? All my friends. I did so many awful things. So many selfish and disgusting things. I shouldn't have done any of this. I'm just messing up a world that I don't even belong in. A world that you wanted to be a part of. I ruined it. I ruined everything. I've made up my mind. Brady, I know I said that I deleted everyone else, but that was kind of an exaggeration. Couldn't find it in myself to do it, even though I knew they weren't real. They were still my friends. I loved them all. And I loved the literature club. I really did love the literature club. That's why I'm going to do this. I think she struggles the most of all with acceptance, like I had mentioned. She does find her way to it at the end, but in a general sense, I think it's easy to say that, like, that's the cause for the entire drama of the game, is like, I do not accept the circumstances that I'm in. I'm going to try to change this and make things worse in the meantime. I think she's highly aware of her present circumstances. She's very calculated without being overoccupied with the future. She, takes information from the past without living there. I think that in even her humble moments, she is able to see herself in context. And, I'm thinking mostly when she's like giving you writing advice, like there's moments of vulnerability in that say like, although she recognizes herself as kind of a perfectionist, she knows that this is not all that she is. In fact, I think her entire like crisis throughout the game is inherently about this, like the self as context. Like who is Monica? Am I like just an artifact of this game? Do I have my own choices? Like it's her testing of this principle, her testing of her own psychological flexibility to discover like, am I even a person? Do my values matter if the people that I know as my friends, don't exist? And do any of my actions matter, right? I think ultimately the choice that she makes to restore them means that she has resolved this and said that, yes, like regardless of whether Monica is just the sort of character sheet that I was born with, I care that Monica is a person I've been and that she made friends, and I want to restore those friends, even if it's like sort of pointless. Like that's a valued action that she commits to as Monica, seeing herself in context. She's not happy with it, and I think that's where she still struggles with this. But I feel like that is kind of her triumph at the end of the game. Really, is like she really sees herself in a full context. And diffusing, like I don't think anyone gets this really. Like I said, it's something you have to practice a lot with. I think that she, like many of us, are just sort of a victim to passing negative thoughts. Like, I'm late to the literature club. I'm not being a good leader, and it's like recognizing that I'm experiencing my own thoughts of being a bad leader. That doesn't necessarily mean I am a bad leader. Like no one, I don't think anyone gets this. Even as someone who's like a whole job it is to talk about this stuff, like it's very hard to sort of master doing this naturally. So that puts Monica at 4, which I guess means I think she is the most psychologically flexible. I don't know if I'd go all the way to say, she has like the best mental health. I think that's just sort of the salacious title I chose for this video. But I think considering the fact that it's her story we see concluded more so than anyone else's, like she pushes everyone to their limits and ultimately they struggle at those limits. And Monica, we see reverse them. Like she endures an existential crisis. She explores whether or not the decisions that she made were led by her own values and ultimately decides that they weren't and reverses course. I think she finds a kind of understanding with herself without fully really accepting it. And, she caused a lot of tragedy along the way that I think, regardless of whether they're sort of real, has real implications for your own health. Like she did this to her friends. Clearly she recognizes them as real enough to restore them. She recognizes Monica, an identity of hers, as real enough to be worth preserving and trying to escape with. Like she doesn't want to escape as just an entity. She wants to escape as Monica. She clearly recognizes the persona that the game has given her as a real thing with real feelings and real experiences. Like, and I think her reversal on that, it is a testament to like her really testing this flexibility and coming out the other side with it. So there you have it. Which Doki has the strongest mental health? I guess I have to say that it's Monica at the end of the story. Like I have been saying throughout this, and like you'd see this throughout my playthrough as well, there are so many moments along the storyline that I think were opportunities for the other characters to learn these skills. And I've talked to death, like what kinds of therapies I would try and, what sort of things I would say to them to help them develop some of these skills. Because ultimately, I think everyone is capable of like better psychological flexibility, stronger resilience. Every single one of these things in the Hexaflex is like a learnable skill. And you don't even need acceptance commitment therapy to do that. Like they're valuable things to work on anyways. Presence of mind is something you can get through dialectic behavioral therapy, like kind of mindfulness, meditation. The self of context we can work on through either narrative therapy, gestalt therapy, or like even just cognitive behavioral therapy, reconciling some distortions and core beliefs about the self that are unhelpful. Same with cognitive diffusion. This is also like a DBT, CBT kind of process. Finding acceptance in life, defining your values, committing to those actions, like there's a lot of modalities that can help with these things. I like that the ACT model kind of tries to put them all together and say, like, that's what makes you resilient to things. But they're all accessible, like no matter who you are, at varying levels, they're accessible. And so I think with the right kind of help and finding them at the right moments during the storyline, those who don't make it out in the best shape definitely could have been helped. And so can all of us. I don't think it's possible to do my job and feel good about it if I wasn't a little bit optimistic. And if I didn't genuinely believe that we all have a potential for greater resilience than we think we have. The world is like a really difficult place in general, but especially right now. And I find myself thinking a lot about like my own resilience to things. I find myself focusing on trying to be present, trying not to doom scroll too much, trying not to like future trip about things and worry so much, especially when things feel like they're out of my control. As someone who's like kind of type A myself and likes to control things, and I think that that puts me at peace somehow. I also struggle with self-as context, right? Like, if I can't control something, then that must mean I'm like failing at something somehow. You know, why can't I figure this out? Why can't I figure out a solution? Well, that's part of acceptance as well. Like, there are just some things that are not for me to control, and we all have to kind of make peace with that. Diffusion as well, like I said, kind of giving yourself a break when I feel like an idiot or feel like a failure, recognizing that that is an experience that I'm having, not a person that I am, and having good values and trying to commit with action to them. I really feel like this is sort of the compass for your life, because it's easy to make goals and say, well, I want to accomplish this and here's how I want to do it and all of that. But it's hard in a sense to say like, well, I'm going to choose a direction to go in my life with certain things, like how I want to spend my time, what things I think are going to make me happy in the long run, and not know really if I'm going to be able to accomplish those things, but just know that I have to commit to the action of pursuing them, and that this by itself is often enough. I feel like this changes so much just based on, you know, how life is going, but it's all worth thinking about, you know, because the alternative is what? Just allow life to defeat you. I don't want to do that. And I don't think that you should either. I think in your own like values work, choosing yourself as a value is like really important, because you can't change everything in your life, but you always have the ability to change things about yourself. Well, with that all said, I hope you enjoyed this analysis, and I hope you took something away from it. So let me know what you think. If you'd like to see more of these style of videos, sometimes there's just like a really meaty analysis that I want to get into that I think would be a bit too much for, you know, the middle of a multi-part video series. So if there are subjects that you want me to cover, or like therapy styles that you want to learn more about and apply to your favorite characters and games, let me know with a comment. That's all from me this time. Thank you for watching, everybody. Be good to yourselves, and I'll see you next time.